It begins in the corner of the eye. After sufficient exposure, the subject glimpses a figure at the edge of vision, or reflected in glass. Continued exposure renders these visualizations permanent. The figure has been observed attempting to communicate with those it haunts, though the nature of these gestures, documented later in this file, remains uncomprehended. Once an individual has accumulated more than 90 hours of exposure to the continuous images produced by the anomaly, that individual will begin to briefly perceive the entity designated SCP-1471 within the edges of their peripheral vision, within reflective surfaces, or within some combination of the two. These initial visualizations are described as fleeting and inconsistent, occurring without apparent pattern in the subject's immediate environment. Continued exposure beyond this 90-hour threshold results in irreversible and sustained visualizations of SCP-1471. The entity, once perceived at this stage, does not recede or dissipate and remains a persistent presence in the subject's field of view. Subjects who have reached this later stage of exposure have reported periodic attempts by SCP-1471 to visually communicate with them. The precise nature of these attempts has not been established. Affected individuals have consistently failed to understand or comprehend the actions performed by the entity, and no coherent interpretation of these communications has been documented. At present, the only known treatment capable of reversing the effects induced by the anomaly is the complete elimination of the individual's visual exposure to the associated images, and this intervention must be carried out prior to the 90-hour post-installation threshold. Beyond this point, no method of reversal is known. To date, no apparent hostile activity has been reported in relation to SCP-1471. The entity's intentions, if any can be inferred, remain unclear, and its ongoing behavior toward affected individuals continues to be monitored under standard observational protocols. Documented behavioral patterns following installation of the application appear to progress along a consistent timeline. During the first 24 hours after installation, the affected mobile device begins to receive images taken at locations commonly frequented by the individual in possession of the device. These transmissions arrive without apparent sender information, and their content reflects familiar environments associated with the subject's routine activity. The nature of these locations suggests prior observation, though the mechanism by which such imagery is obtained has not been established. After 48 hours have elapsed from the point of installation, the character of the received images shifts. The mobile device begins to receive photographs taken at locations recently visited by the individual. These images correspond to places the subject has occupied within a narrow window preceding transmission, indicating that the source of the imagery maintains awareness of the subject's movements in near current terms, rather than relying solely on habitual patterns. After 72 hours, the progression enters its final documented stage. At this point, the affected mobile device begins to receive images of the individual in real time. Within these images, the entity designated SCP-1471 appears in close proximity to the subject. The entity is present in the frame during the moment of capture, positioned near the individual, though the subject typically reports no direct awareness of its presence at the time the image is taken. The consistency of this escalating pattern across recorded instances has been noted, and the phenomenon remains under continued study. The following material is drawn from an archived document designated for restricted internal review. Access to the record requires the appropriate clearance, and the contents are reproduced here under those conditions. What follows is presented as the application listing observed on public distribution storefronts prior to Foundation intervention. The listing appears in the format standard to such platforms and offers no explanatory text, no publisher description, and no accompanying imagery beyond that native to the platform itself. The product is identified only by the name Mallow. Beneath the name is a version designation, given as version 1.0.0. The listing is offered at no cost to the end user. The reviews section, at the time of archival, indicated a total of 0 entries. No screenshots, no permissions summary, no developer contact information, and no supplementary documentation accompany the record as archived. The brevity of the listing is itself considered noteworthy. Products of this nature, distributed through the storefronts in question, are ordinarily required to provide substantially more information prior to public availability. The mechanism by which the listing bypassed these standard requirements has not been determined. Foundation personnel are reminded that the archival document is provided for reference only, and that installation, transmission, or reproduction of the associated application is strictly prohibited under existing containment protocols. The listing itself is understood to function as the initial vector by which affected devices acquire the anomaly, and any observed reappearance of the listing on active storefronts is to be reported through standard channels without delay. The following text is recovered from promotional material associated with the anomalous application, reproduced here as a document of interest. Its author and origin remain unverified, and its inclusion in this file is for reference only. The listing reads as follows. For recipient designation, redacted. Never settle for those awkward feelings of being alone ever again. Mal-O is an exciting and interactive experience that will keep you engaged and intrigued. The anxiety of social situations can be nerve-wracking, but after just a few hours of Mal-O, you will soon forget all about those painful emotions of disappointment. Be part of the new craze that is quickly becoming the next social substitute. Remember, the more you participate, the more Mal-O will engage you. Your experience is completely up to you. Absolutely no advertisements. Enjoy. The listing terminates with a single prompt reading, "Buy?" ? Analysis of the promotional text is ongoing. Personnel are reminded that the marketing copy addresses the reader in the second person and appears designed to exploit conditions of isolation and social discomfort. The reference to increased engagement in proportion to user participation is noted as consistent with observed behavioral patterns in affected individuals, though the mechanism by which such engagement is sustained remains outside the scope of this section. Foundation personnel are prohibited from acquiring, installing, or interacting with the application under any circumstances, and any exposure to the listing or its promotional text should be documented in the appropriate incident log without delay. Turning to matters of designation and object class, the entity is presently held under the classification of Euclid, reflecting the current understanding of its behavior and the incomplete predictability of its manifestations. Special containment procedures are as follows. All mobile devices upon which the anomalous application has been installed are to be confiscated by Foundation personnel at the earliest opportunity. Once secured, each such device is to undergo analysis, with particular attention paid to any information that may indicate the presence of additional affected devices in circulation. Contact records, distribution histories, and installation traces are of principal interest, as these may serve as leads toward locating further instances of the application in civilian possession. Following the completion of this analysis, containment proceeds through a standardized procedure. The batteries of the affected devices are to be removed, thereby eliminating the possibility of unintended activation or further transmission of the application. Each device is then to be assigned an individual sub-designation within the numbered series associated with this file, allowing for consistent tracking, cross-referencing, and inventory control across the containment record. Once designated, the devices are to be transferred to Storage Unit 91, located at Research Site 45, where they are to remain under standard secure storage conditions alongside other instances of the same anomaly. This centralized housing arrangement facilitates ongoing comparative study, while ensuring that no single device remains isolated, active, or accessible to unauthorized personnel. Under no circumstances are batteries to be reinstalled without explicit authorization from the responsible research staff. Beyond the immediate protocols governing seized units, containment extends into the broader digital environment through which the anomaly propagates. All online application stores servicing mobile devices are to be placed under continuous observation. This monitoring is to be conducted at all hours, without interruption, and is to encompass every storefront through which software may be distributed to a portable device. The purpose of this observation is to prevent any inadvertent sale, transfer, or distribution of SCP-1471 to members of the general public. Listings suspected of corresponding to the anomaly are to be flagged, cataloged, and subjected to further review by qualified personnel before any further action is authorized. Where a device is suspected of already possessing an active instance of the anomaly, containment procedures shift from passive monitoring to direct intervention. Such devices are to be targeted through the deployment of self-uploading malware, distributed remotely and without the knowledge or consent of the device holder. This software is designed to disable the affected device entirely, rendering it inoperable and preventing any further interaction between the anomaly and its user. The device is to remain in this disabled state until such time as it can be physically recovered. Recovery is to be conducted by field agents dispatched for that specific purpose. Upon seizure, the device enters standard containment procedures as previously outlined. Through this combined approach of surveillance, remote disablement, and physical retrieval, the Foundation seeks to intercept instances of the anomaly at every stage of their distribution before wider exposure to the civilian population can occur. Turning now to the technical description of the anomaly as it presents in its digital form. SCP-1471 manifests as a free application for mobile devices with a listed file size of approximately 9.8 megabytes. Within online application storefronts, it appears under the title Mal-O version 1.0.0. The naming convention, while consistent across observed instances, offers no insight into the origin, purpose, or authorship of the software. No developer is listed alongside the application. This absence is notable, as commercial and public distribution platforms typically require developer identification as a prerequisite for listing. SCP-1471 nonetheless appears on these platforms without any such attribution, and is available for download in the same manner as any conventionally approved application. The means by which SCP-1471 bypasses the application approval process remains undetermined. Standard procedure requires that submitted software undergo review before being made available for public distribution. SCP-1471 does not appear to be subjected to this review, or is capable of circumventing it entirely, allowing it to proceed directly to distribution without intermediary evaluation. In addition to its unexplained appearance within storefronts, SCP-1471 demonstrates a marked resistance to conventional software removal. Program Manager applications, including those designed to identify and uninstall unwanted or malicious software, are unable to detect, quarantine, or remove SCP-1471 from an affected device. The mechanism responsible for this persistence has not been identified. and current containment protocols, therefore, rely on interception and hardware-level intervention rather than software-based countermeasures. Following installation, the application produces no visible presence on the affected device. No icons are generated, no shortcuts appear on the home screen or within the standard application drawer. From the perspective of routine inspection, the software has effectively concealed itself, and the user is provided no ordinary means of locating, opening, or removing it through the device interface. Activity resumes through the messaging function. At intervals of approximately 3 to 6 hours, the anomaly transmits individual images to the device by means of standard text messaging. The distribution appears automated. No sender address consistent with a known contact is required for these transmissions to occur, and no user initiation has been observed to trigger them. Every image produced through this method shares a single consistent element. In each transmitted picture, the entity designated SCP-1471-A is present, occupying either the background or the foreground of the composition. The surrounding imagery varies. The presence of the entity does not. SCP-1471-A is described in recovered documentation as a large humanoid figure. Its head is noted to resemble the skull of a canid, and the figure is further characterized by the presence of long black hair. No additional physiological description is available at this level of documentation, and Foundation personnel are instructed to refrain from prolonged examination of transmitted images beyond that required for cataloging. The regularity of the transmissions, combined with the consistent framing of the entity within them, is presently regarded as the primary observable behavior of the anomaly following installation.